Greetings, my name is Monty Martin.
And I'm Callie McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes. Welcome to our channel where we cover everything Dungeons & Dragons, including advice for players and guides for Dungeon Masters.
We upload new videos every Thursday, so please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Today, we are taking an in-depth look at 5 of our favorite offensive buff spells in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition.
Offensive buff spells are the ones that are going to make you stronger, faster, or hit even harder. We're not really looking at the defensive buff spells or the utility options. There are a lot of those as well that we will be looking at in future episodes. We're going to be listing these in order of spell level, and we're going to be talking about their abilities and how you can use them in your game.
As always, we've chosen to focus on buff spells of 5th level and lower in this video to really focus on the spells that are seeing common use in most game tables. There's a lot to discuss, so let's get rolling.
The first spell we're going to look at today is a first level enchantment spell available to paladins and clerics, and that is Bless.
Bless might be the bread and butter buffing spell of the divine spellcasters in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. This spell allows you to spend 1 action to cast it, and you get to choose up to 3 targets within a 30-foot range. Those targets get to add a 1d4 to any attack roll or saving throw they make as long as the spell persists, up to 1 minute or as long as your concentration lasts. You can increase the spell level, targeting more creatures as you increase the spell level as well.
At first glance, a d4 doesn't seem like a lot to add to a dice roll, but the amount of times that I've seen this spell used in combat that have saved characters' lives or allowed them to get that defining hit on the enemy that will end the combat is outstanding. And I actually always feel a lot better going into a combat encounter with Bless on me than I do without it.
Bless is actually the perfect combination of offense and defense in one first level, very efficient package. Clerics will be tempted to cast the Bless spell even at high levels of play, particularly when you've got lots of fighters, rangers, and paladins, character classes that can make lots of attacks in a single turn and often need a little bit of help with their saving throws as well.
Because of the way bounded accuracy works in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, this means that even something as small as a +1 bonus to your dice rolls for attacks or saving throws can make a huge difference. Adding a d4 means that you can get anywhere from 1 to 4 added to those rolls, which can make the difference in any combat encounter between surviving or not.
A lot of players forget that they have the Bless spell cast on them, so you clerics and paladins out there that are casting Bless regularly, bring a couple extra d4s with you and pass them out to the players that you're casting the spell on to remind them. Time and time again, I've seen a player make an attack roll and get disappointed because they miss, only to be reminded by the cleric that Bless is in effect, and they roll that d4, get a 4, and turn that miss into a hit, which can make all the difference in the world in a combat encounter.
This is one of those spells that you take as soon as you get access to it and will be useful for the entire campaign. It's one of those spells that you're going to hang on to and you're going to use in almost every combat encounter that you go into. Bless
might not be a flashy spell, particularly for clerics who have some awesome options with their concentration, but it is a dependable one and a highly efficient one, costing only a first level spell slot. When you go into a combat encounter as a cleric, you should really strongly consider whether you might get the best bang for your buck simply by casting the Bless spell and going on to your other spells that you can use, rather than using any of the big guns if you don't need to.
The next spell on our list is a 2nd level transmutation spell available for sorcerers, wizards, and artificers, and that is Enlarge Reduce.
Enlarge Reduce is a Swiss Army knife spell that can be used as a debuff or a utility spell. But when used as an offensive buff, you are able to choose one of your biggest, beefiest compatriots and make them even bigger and even beefier, because it doubles their size in all dimensions, turning a medium-sized creature into a large one and causing their melee attacks to deal an extra 1d4 points of damage. A perfect setup for the fighter's Action Surge or the barbarian's Rage. In addition, the target also does have advantage on strength checks and strength saving throws, although not advantage on strength-based attack rolls.
A bigger character means that they're going to be a bigger target, but also they're going to have a bigger presence on the battlefield. And even outside of just swinging their weapons at the enemies, they can lift things up, throw them, carry objects, and do a lot more with their newfound strength from being enlarged.
There are only a handful of spells in the game that give characters a bonus to their damage for melee attacks. Spells such as Elemental Weapon, Flame Arrows, and even Magic Weapon will give a couple extra points of damage on every single attack that lands, but Enlarge Reduce is one of the lowest level spells and one of the only options that is not one of the ones that you can only cast on yourself or requires your own concentration. So for instance, you could enlarge a ranger who casts Hunter's Mark, and then they're going to be able to combine both the benefits of their own Hunter's Mark and the fact that they've been enlarged together.
Enlarge Reduce falls into one of those categories where you as a spellcaster get to feel like you have a major impact on the battle, even without using a damage-dealing spell. This spell is so valuable because it does give a combat edge, even on top of being a very tactical spell as well.
The next spell we're looking at today comes from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and it's a little bit of an outlier as far as buff spells go, because it is an illusion spell. It is Shadow Blade.
This second level illusion spell allows you to create a blade out of shadows and darkness, which you are immediately proficient with. It does 2d8 psychic damage, and if your opponent is in dim light or darkness, you have advantage on the attack.
The weapon itself has the finesse, light, and thrown properties, making it a very flexible and powerful weapon that you conjure basically out of nowhere. Shadow Blade is part of a class of spells that can only affect yourself, but increase your own melee or, in some cases, ranged damage output. This includes spells such as Divine Favor, but also Guardian of Nature, Swift Quiver, and Tensor's Transformation. So there's a lot of examples of spells across several different classes and various levels of play that you can use in this way. Shadow Blade just happens to be one of the earliest available ones and a particular favorite for us.
One thing to keep in mind when you're looking at these types of spells is that they do require concentration. So you need to weigh them against the other options for your concentration because there might be something better you can do with that ability. However, these spells can make a big difference in combat. My favorite place to use this spell is when using an Arcane Trickster Rogue. It's kind of a hidden gem there and not immediately apparent. It can really change the way the Arcane Trickster Rogue works. The next spell on our list is a third level evocation spell available to Paladins and War Domain Clerics, and that is Crusader's Mantle.
Crusader's Mantle takes one action to cast, and after you cast it, it creates an aura out to a range of 30 feet that affects non-hostile creatures in the aura. Such creatures are emboldened with divine power, and their weapon attacks deal an extra 1d4 radiant damage on a hit. This aura does continue to move with you, and it lasts for up to 1 minute or as long as you concentrate on it.
Now, this could be compared a lot to Bless. They both do similar things, but the major difference with Crusader's Mantle is that it is an aura effect, so it affects everybody within that range that is friendly to you. Because of this, it means that if you have a party of more than just 3 people, or if you're going into a large-scale battle with a group of soldiers on your side, this can affect everybody within 30 feet, which can make a huge difference, far surpassing Bless.
As we said earlier, effects that directly give you a bonus to weapon damage rolls are quite rare, and Crusader's Mantle stands out as one of the few ways to give a large number of creatures a bonus to their damage on every single attack that you make. Imagine a paladin casting Crusader's Mantle and then leading a group of archers in defending a castle in a siege. Every single one of those archers on the top of that castle tower is now going to be doing an extra 1d4 radiant damage. Great way to break an undead army. On the flip side, if you have members of your party that are able to make multiple attacks in a turn, such as fighters, monks, barbarians, or rangers, the value of this spell simply continues to rise, and it may in fact be one of the best ways to increase the overall damage output of your entire party.
I love the idea of Crusader's Mantle being combined with other party members also unleashing some really great spells. Imagine, if you will, a paladin laying down Crusader's Mantle while the cleric casts Bless and a bard casts Fairy Fire. You're now adding a lot of potential damage and extra hits to that combat encounter.
Buffs don't need to be evaluated on their own merits, and many of them can be combined together. And even though Crusader's Mantle might not be the front runner for the first buff spell you might want to throw down, Bless still might have that honor. If you are in a party with multiple characters that all have their concentration slots, do not underestimate the multiplicative effect of your teamwork of stacking all these buffs together.
The last spell we're going to look at today for our list of offensive buff spells is a 3rd level transmutation spell available for sorcerers, wizards, and artificers.
However, Grasslands, Circle of the Land Druids, and Oath of Vengeance Paladins can also access this spell.
And that spell is the one, the only, Haste.
Haste is perhaps one of the best loved and favorite buff spells in the entire game, and it has a lot of powerful effects packed into a 3rd level spell slot.
You cast Haste as an action on a willing creature within 30 feet, and this immediately doubles their movement speed, adds 2 to their AC, gives them advantage on dexterity saving throws, and allows them to make an extra action on their turn.
This extra action can only be used to take the dash, disengage, hide, use an object, or attack actions. It's worth noting as well an additional restriction that when you use the attack action granted to you by Haste, you can only make 1 weapon attack. This extra action cannot be used to cast any spells, not even cantrips, but that alone makes this extra action from Haste so powerful, so flexible, and perhaps makes Haste one of the best buff spells in the entire game. The only downside, of course, is that when the spell ends, after 1 minute, or if your concentration ends, the target suffers a wave of lethargy, which causes them to lose their action and movement for 1 turn after the spell ends.
The idea here is that you cast Haste on a party member and you hope that they can make it through the entire combat encounter, unleashing mayhem on their enemies. Afterwards, being able to rest and not be overly affected by the negative consequences of Haste. However, losing your concentration in the midst of battle leaves your ally in a very vulnerable position.
The strategy with Haste is clear. Choose one of your party's heaviest hitters and let them go to town. Pick a party member that's selected a feat like Great Weapon Master or Sharpshooter, or has some other ability that lets them deal lots of extra damage with that bonus attack, such as a Paladin's Smite or a Barbarian's Rage, giving them extra damage and advantage on attacks thanks to Reckless Attack.
You can do even one better if you're a sorcerer with the Twin Spell Meta Magic, and you can Haste 2 targets instead of 1, which will allow those 2 party members to unleash mayhem on your enemies.
These are all some very impressive buff spells, but it is important to remember 2 things about using buff spells in battle. First of all, most of them take 1 action to cast, and second of all, most of them require your character to concentrate on it. This is why teamwork is vital.
Because most of these spells require an action to cast, it is important to know the dynamic of teamwork within your party. If you can get these spells off before combat even begins, it's going to be even better. And if you can converse with your party members about who is going to unleash which buff spell and how they're going to stack together to really impact that battle, you can actually unleash some really powerful combinations on your enemies.
Furthermore, you also need to recognize which members of your party are going to get the most benefit from these buffs. Casting a buff spell like Haste on the party's rogue might be great, giving them that extra speed advantage, but they can't sneak attack on more than 1 attack that they make in a turn, so they don't get as much from Haste as perhaps the Sharpshooter Ranger or the Great Weapon Master Barbarian. So consider this really carefully when you are applying buffs across your party, and try to choose the characters that are going to pair really nicely like cheese and a fine wine.
So this has been a look at 5 offensive buff spells in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. If there's any that you think we missed, tell us about them in the comments below.
If you're enjoying the show, please consider supporting our work on Patreon. You can find out how by following the links in the description below.
Don't forget to check out our live play Shadows of Drakkenheim, which airs Tuesday nights at 6 p.m. Eastern on Twitch. You can find all the previous episodes right up over here.
And we have plenty more coverage on all the awesome spells in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition right up over here.
Please subscribe to our channel so that you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.